Today's episode is brought to you by Geek Fuel, a great subscription box service that ships out a mystery box each month that has at least $50 worth of value for just $15 plus shipping and handling. Every box has an exclusive t-shirt, a full downloadable game, and 5 to 7 other great geek culture items. Start your subscription today and get a free bonus item worth $10 in your first box by heading to geekfuel.com/wordballoon. This is a great Christmas kind of gift that would be wonderful for yourself or someone you know. geekfuel.com/wordballoon. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Sutras here. Good double feature for you today. We're going to start things off with Vivek Tiwary, the writer of The Fifth Beatle, a great biography of Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager, who really had a very tough personal life. Vivek and I talked about this a few years ago when the book first came out from Dark Horse Comics. Now there's an expanded edition, and in fact, a new event television series is in the works. Vivek tells us all the details in part 1 of Word Balloon. In part 2, we welcome back Heath Corson. Right before the Thanksgiving holiday, Heath and I were able to sit down and talk in my radio studio and just BS about the geek culture this year and some various thoughts. Heath has been doing an excellent job in animation and in comics. He's been writing the King's Feature Heroes and also wonderful series Bizarro last year for DC. Plus some great animated movies, Tom and Jerry Meet Johnny Quest in Spy Quest, and of course a lot of the great DC animated movies like Justice League War, Justice League Throne of Atlantis, Batman Arkham Asylum, which really was a Suicide Squad animated film. So many great movies, and Heath has a lot of great thoughts on what's going on today in the geek culture. Okay, without further ado, let's pick up our conversation with Vivek Tiwary. Now, we start off on Skype, but then we started having some trouble, so we had to switch over to phone in mid-conversation. But I'm sure you're going to enjoy this discussion about the Fifth Beatle, the history of Brian Epstein, and his relationship with the Beatles, the tough life that he really led, including his untimely death, and news about the event television series that's in the works, and also some hints on some other directions Vivek wants to go into when he is done exploring Brian Epstein and the Fifth Beatle. Fifth Beatle is out by Dark Horse Comics, and there's another great example of a very cool Christmas gift. And also, consider giving it to someone who isn't maybe a normal comic book reader, and they'll be blown away by the art and also the story itself. It's a tremendous presentation. So let's talk to Vivek Tiwary about the Fifth Beatle now on Word Balloon. Really happy to welcome back Vivek Tiwary to Word Balloon. We spoke when the Fifth Beatle was in its infancy. It had just come out the month earlier. We talked in December of 2013. And,
amazing.
Really happy to have you back, Vivek. I've seen you at a couple conventions, and it's good to have you on for a nice long conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Congratulations on the book, man. I'm really happy that it's obviously doing as well as it is to now have this paperback version that includes more bonus material, correct?
Yeah, no, it's been a real joy. I mean, we're 3 years in from the release of the book, and it's amazing to see how many new fans we're still picking up, and how many old fans are still excited and still love the project and are interested in bonus materials. It's been really humbling is kind of the best word for it, both exhilarating and humbling. So yeah, just really, really excited to be at this place and really proud of the bonus materials as well. In much the same way that I was proud of the book when it first came out, I'm really proud of what we've done with the expanded edition.
Tell us about the differences and some of the things that people can find in this expanded version.
So it's got about 30 pages of bonus material. So it's a really hefty section at the end of the book. And, I know that this is going to sound a bit self-serving, but I really do think it is a special section. I'm a comic geek since childhood. I often say I learned to read by reading comics. I've been reading comics my whole life. And I will be honest, I am not typically a big fan of expanded editions or anniversary editions because I usually feel more often than not they're just like, they dig up a couple of old sketches, throw them at the end, and just squeeze an extra dollar out of a hardcore fan. And it's often insulting, just to be totally honest,
Understood.
And so we tried very seriously to not do that. We wanted to do two things. One is, we wanted to put the book out in paperback at just a reduced price so that it would be easier for people who may have been on the fence about picking it up to pick it up. Now it's literally $14.99 now. So that was part of our goal.
That's
but
excellent, man. Let me just say that because really it is a great book and the art is beautiful. The story is great. So no, that's a great value. Go on.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And then we wanted to put together some bonus materials that really felt special. And there's a couple of things going on here. Like the first part of the bonus materials is there's literally stuff in there that just couldn't have existed. It sort of reflects the changes in the world since 2013 to 2016. Right off the bat, for example, the book has an introduction by Billy J. Kramer, who was a Britpop artist that Brian managed alongside the Beatles. He had hits like "Do You Want to Know a Secret" and "Bad to Me" and "Little Children."
Absolutely.
And he wrote an introduction to the book. He was managed by Brian, and the first lines of his introduction are, "I am baffled by the fact that Brian Epstein has not been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." And it's dated. It says 2000, Billy J. Kramer, 2013. Well, the truth is, a year later, Brian was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Excellent.
And to their immense credit, the Rock Hall called me and they said, we know we need to induct him, that he deserves it, but we don't know much about him. And you're a bit of an expert on Brian. And would you work with us? Would you help us on the induction?
Wow.
And so I had the great honor. Thank you. I had the great honor of working with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on the induction of Brian Epstein and being a liaison to the family and providing information and tracking down memorabilia for their exhibit. And so I wrote an essay called "The Curtain Rising" about my experiences working with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and inducting Brian Epstein and how much had changed to get to the place where the music industry was finally recognizing him. And that essay is included in the book.
That's fantastic.
And thank you. And another example, the book was, I don't think of the Fifth Beatle as being it's not an activist book. I'm not a politician, but I do hope that the book is inspiring, and I hope that it will activate people to follow their dreams. So in some ways, I guess you could think of it as a little activist in that sense. I hope that people, my readers, will finish that book and close it wanting to go out and make a difference in the world. And, to that end, in the original version of the book, we had Howard Cruz, the pioneering LGBTQ cartoonist who wrote Stuck Rubber Baby.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote an afterword to the book called The Freedom to Marry. And it was explaining about the struggles that Brian faced as a gay man in the 1960s, which is a big element of this book.
Absolutely.
And Howard was explaining how in 2013, the world had gotten better, but there was still a lot to be achieved. And
Sure.
One place to put your efforts, if you were interested, is in the fight for marriage equality. It's something that Brian couldn't have even imagined having a boyfriend, much less one day being able to potentially get married and have children.
Yeah.
So it's something that would have been very close to his heart. And, that was 2013. And thankfully, in the years that followed, the Supreme Court ratified the freedom to marry. And now it's a legal thing all over the United States. So Howard Cruz wrote a revised essay, which is now called "The Freedom for All Americans." And the expanded edition of the Fifth Beatle reflects the changes in the world between 2013 and 2016, hopefully that essay will be valid for some time to come. Donald Trump did recently say that that was not, the freedom to marry was not something that he planned on trying to overturn, and I hope he meant that.
That was kind of
hard to know what you mean. It was comforting
in that 60 Minutes interview. I agree, and it was nice to see. Was that what when he said he literally said it was settled law? Am I right?
Yeah. It's interesting because he obviously has a number of times sort of said contradictory things.
Yes, he has.
But he did say the Supreme Court has ruled on it, and so I'm not going to go back and try to change that. But, there's a number of other things that he's seeking to change that the Supreme Court has weighed in on in the past.
Right.
So nothing's totally safe. But he did specifically, to his immense credit, he did very specifically, when it comes to the freedom to marry, he specifically said he was going to leave that be. So I hope he meant it.
I agree with you, man. And I know, too, prior to his presidential run, seemed to be on the right side of this as well and saying, what's the big deal? Which thankfully – hopefully there are more people that feel that way. I know that Vice President Pence is not a friend to the LGBTQ community.
He certainly is not.
No, and it's it's. Man, we were talking before we started recording, and I was telling you in a lighter way that it certainly did take the fun out of the Cubs winning the World Series, the outcome of the election, and that pales in comparison to the real world concerns that are out there right now. And I can certainly appreciate that. I am fortunate that I live in a city where, and I know that a lot of the other big cities have kind of stood up and said no matter what changes might happen on the federal level that. Our city leaders, and I can say that for Chicago. I think I've seen the same thing in New York. And
that's where I am. I'm in New York.
There you go.
We sent that message out loud and clear.
That's cool. And I'm glad our.
But look, I mean, regardless of I know there's a lot of Trump supporters out there, and I suspect there's several of them listening to this podcast. And I think the reality is that whatever your political leanings are, we are clearly living in a world that has deep division. And this is a time where you need to stand up for what you believe in, whatever that is, and, obviously, selfishly, I hope the people listening will believe in the things that I believe, which are, anti-racism and pro-LGBTQ and a number of human rights issues. That's what I think Vivek Tiwary stand for, and certainly what I think the Beatles and Brian Epstein stood for. But whatever it is your dreams are, we are living in a world where you need to stand up and fight for your dreams. And I hope that's what the Fifth Beatle represents,
Agreed. And I also, we talked about it in our first interview. All I know is as a young Beatle fan, I wasn't aware of Brian's orientation, but even more so the laws that existed in Britain in the early 60s. And now, because of things like the Fifth Beatle and also maybe films like The Imitation Game, and you learn more about, you learn about, that not only were these relationships, frowned upon, but literally it was illegal.
Yeah, and I mean, in Brian's case, I mean, it is particularly stunning to somebody, who didn't live through it. I was born in 1973. I didn't live through it.
Yeah.
And, prior to doing this research, when I thought about the Beatles in 1967, you think, the psychedelic era, right?
Sure.
The summer of love.
Anything goes.
Summer of love, right?
Yes.
Free love, for God's sakes.
Yes.
Well, the truth is, it was free love and summer of love if you had the right kind of love.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had the wrong kind of love, there was no such thing as free love. It was you better stay inside that summer in the closet or you're going to get sunburned. I mean, it was serious business.
Yeah.
And to me, that was remarkable to think of a band, whose message was all about love, that ushered in an era that's remembered as being an era of free love and a specific summer, a specific 3-month period called the Summer of Love in which Sgt. Pepper's was released.
Yep.
And the guy that was actually behind the scenes making all that stuff happen was gay and was told that his form of love was a felony. I mean, it's a remarkable story.
And also to get behind this band in the early 60s and have the vision of let's elevate this band to an international stage while having to maintain a secret life and really fearing for real serious consequences should his personal life ever become public.
No question. But I mean, you look at things like The Imitation Game, which is a wonderful movie and very illuminating. But when you see it in the Brian Epstein story and you see it wrapped up in such a public display of love, it's the discrepancy is hard to swallow. The major difference, there's a lot of emotional similarities between the Brian Epstein story and the Alan Turing story, the Imitation Game. But a major difference is that Alan Turing, almost by definition of what he was doing, had to do it in secret. He was working on a top secret mission that he could not be public about. Whereas for Brian, his whole job was to make the Beatles as publicly successful as possible.
All right. Unfortunately, Skype got a little congested, so we've had to switch to talking to Vivek via the phone. But the good news is we've got a nice clean line, and we can continue our conversation. So, if I may, have you repeat the last point you were making?
Yeah, so we were talking about that it's wonderful that a lot of stories like The Imitation Game and The Fifth Beatle are being told now, and sort of educating folks to the situation back in the UK in the 50s and 60s, and how oppressive it was for people who had, for people who were gay, just putting it bluntly.
Sure.
And the Alan Turing story, and I was making the point that the Alan Turing story and the Brian Epstein story share a lot of emotional beats and a lot of similar DNA, certainly. But one key difference is that Turing, by nature of what he did, had to keep things secret. He was literally working on a top secret project that he couldn't tell the public about, but by definition. Whereas Brian was, his job was to market to the world a rock and roll band. So literally, Brian's success was almost measured by how much he could put the Beatles in the public eye. So every time he faced a work accomplishment, he was putting himself at greater danger of having his stature as a homosexual come to light, which could have gotten him thrown in jail. So it's and of course, I can't remember when exactly your line might have cut off, but we were talking about the fact that the Beatles were a band that really was all about love.
Yes.
All you need is love. She loves you, lovely Rita, etc. And so here's also a guy that's dedicated his entire life to helping this, or his entire adult life, to helping this group spread a great message of love around the world, ushering in eras that are literally called the Summer of Love. And yet, he dies lonely at the age of 32, never having had a proper boyfriend. I mean, it's fairly tragic and illuminating stuff. And I hope that in tragedy you can find inspiration. You can find, again, I hate to use the word activism, but I hope that you'll put down the book and feel like whatever your dream is, or whatever you're passionate about, or whatever injustice you see in the world, that you might decide to mobilize and use whatever skills you have to realize that dream or to make that difference.
The guy was a visionary, absolutely, and really saw the potential in the Beatles beyond what they were doing when he walked into the Cavern Club back in '62. I also like, and as a guy from the comic book business, I think you can appreciate as well, Brian's early role as a record retailer in his father's department store.
Totally.
You could make the connection of comic book retailers as well, and how important it was his role as a record seller, both in terms of becoming aware of the Beatles and, again, seeing the avenue to evolve the band into what they become.
No question about it. I mean, comic book stores are like safe havens for me. Whenever I travel, if I can find a comic book store, it's like, if I'm lonely, you go into the comic book store and you immediately find common ground. Like these are my people.
Definitely.
And that's why I believe that those stores are never going to go out of business. Because there's something you get in those places. Advice, of everything from advice on what books to read to just a sense of comfort and the familiar. And I think, that's what record stores do too. And granted, a lot of those have gone out of business, but that's because of difference in how the medium is consumed.
Sure.
And in some ways they're coming back around, because the DJ stores, the vinyl stores are doing fantastic business.
That's a very good point.
So,
absolutely. Well, and again, these are the record store owners or tastemakers.
That's right.
Putting in the pop culture kind of vernacular.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's exactly the thing, and so he really had to go out and initially, just for the local Liverpool sellers and stuff, make sure that the My Bonnie records were in stock. That kind of were their first recorded record push, I suppose, and then also when he was making those initial deals, that's a real thing that he would kind of go and buy thousands of records himself to kind of keep the Beatles on the charts in those very early testing the water times.
And, it's funny, even that is sort of, I don't know, visionary is the right word, but certainly, pioneering. It's the kind of thing that these days, it's kind of music business 101. Like all the record labels do that kind of thing.
Hey, man, that's kind of common.
When Brian was the first to do it, or maybe not the first, but he was among the first, certainly.
Well, and it's comic books 101, too. I can think of some publishers that are known to kind of stuff the stores with a lot more than what they ordered. Hey, man, we only ordered all of of this of Book X, and we got
totally
500 copies.
I have to tell you, and this is also going to sound self-serving, but it is a true story. The Fifth Beatle originally came out, as we were saying earlier, around this time 3 years ago. It came out just before Thanksgiving, like literally just a few days before Thanksgiving, and I remember right before the book came out, having a conference call with Dark Horse in which we said, when the break is over, when the Thanksgiving break is over, let's regroup and have a call about how we might be able to influence the New York Times bestseller charts, because the way that those charts work is they're weighted. There's certain stores that if they sell, one copy, it's counted as 3 copies. It's a very strange system, but there are certain stores that are, with the idea being that, that there are a lot of smaller stores that don't report their numbers. So they assume for every store X that's selling 1 copy, there's probably 2 tiny stores that aren't reporting that are also selling. So it's a very strange system. But as a result, it's just known that, you could try to boost sales at certain retail accounts to help you increase your placement on the charts.
Crazy.
So
Absolutely.
it's crazy, right? But that's at least that's the way it worked 3 years ago. I don't know if that's changed, but that's certainly the way it was then.
I understand. I come from a pop music background and stuff, and the same can be said in terms of radio and records used to be like Billboard and had our own charts.
Oh, totally. I worked in the music industry. It's been years. I mean, I left the industry, the traditional music industry, in 1999.
Oh, there you go.
But I remember very distinctly it was the exact same thing in the days of SoundScan. There were certain big indie record stores that their SoundScans counted for 2 or 3. Because the idea was that there were smaller indie record stores that didn't have SoundScan, and so for every one that Amoeba Records sold, it would count as 3 or whatever the formula was. Yep. But so we had this call with Dark Horse, and so literally we were like, when we get back, we'll discuss how we might be able to try to get on the charts. And then literally, I turned my phone off for Thanksgiving so I could just be with my family. Turned the phone back on Friday, and I got a message from Paul Levitz, who's a dear friend of mine and was former head of DC. Didn't have anything to do with the book. He's just a buddy. And he was like, "Hey, Vivek, congratulations on the New York Times." And I called him back, and I was like, "What are you talking about? What happened with the New York Times?" And he was like, "Your book debuted on the New York Times charts. It debuted at number 5. It went all the way to number 1 in about 3 weeks. But Fantastic. It was a total surprise. We didn't influence the charts at all.
That's excellent.
I won't lie. We were we were about to discuss how we could influence the charts, but we didn't.
Have to. Hey man, doesn't surprise me.
We were about to. Yeah.
Great product. Hey man, great product. Great subject.
Thank you. And
absolutely.
hey, I want to backtrack for a second and also give some credit where it's due. You'd asked me to sort of describe the new stuff that was in the special edition.
Yes.
And we got off on a tangent talking about Howard Cruz and LGBTQ rights, but I got to for a minute talk about my amazing artists. Andrew Robinson and Kyle Baker did absolutely breathtaking work on this book. And one of the big treats in the expanded edition is both of them have fairly significant bonus sections. So Andrew has literally a 25-page bonus gallery section, which again, not to sound self-serving, but it's not just like a couple of sketches that we dug out and threw out to like get an extra buck out of the fans. I mean, it's a humbling section. Like Andrew also starts by showing his early character designs where he's like trying to nail the Beatles and not quite getting it right, and how he eventually got it right. He shows reference photos that he was using. He shows his pencil sketches. It's a pretty amazing sequence if you're interested. It's almost educational if you're interested in how art is created.
No, that's the kind of stuff I think that a lot of people hope for, is that kind of process information.
Totally.
When the absolute editions of DC or the Marvel omnibus things, come out, that's the stuff that people
That's what you hope for. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Totally.
No, that's cool.
And Kyle Baker, those of you who've read the book will know that Kyle in the Fifth Beatle, he has a very small sequence. It's a 7-page sequence called Chaos in the Philippines that pays tribute to the old Beatles cartoons from the 1960s, not Yellow Submarine, but the ones that aired on television. It's a period in the Beatles' career where they go to the Philippines, they inadvertently snub Imelda Marcos. She pulls security from them. They get chased out of the country by the Filipino army. As soon as they get out of the country, they think everything is safe, and they hear they're burning Beatles records in America, and it's exactly when John's "The Beatles are bigger than Jesus" comment has gotten out. And so, in my mind as a creator, I thought, this is a period in the Beatles' history where everything went cartoony. Life must have felt like being in a cartoon. So I thought, let's do it like a cartoon, and who better to do that than master cartoonist Kyle Baker?
Absolutely.
And he did wonderful work on it, but it was small, and by design, I wanted it to feel like an insert in the book. So for me, it's a great thrill to have Kyle have a bonus section, which is about 7 or 8 pages long. So literally, it's like doubling the amount of Kyle Baker Beatles art that's been in the book. So that, if you're a Kyle Baker fan, I think that's also a special treat to get to see even more Beatles work from Kyle. So I'm definitely tooting my own horn a little bit here, but I really do think the special edition stuff are pretty cool, and we're charging less for it. So I think, hopefully the fans will feel like we're actually providing some value as opposed to feeling like we're just trying to squeeze another buck out of them, because that was not the intention with this book. In fact, the expanded edition's purpose was to reach more people, to price it low and have more stuff in it to hopefully expand the reach of people who are hearing the story and going back to where we left off and hopefully walking away from it inspired to make a difference in the world.
There's so many interior pages that I think would make amazing lithos or really wall art beyond, being beautiful inside the book. Have you guys thought about that? And forgive me, I haven't seen you have a table where if you do have that kind of product.
No, we haven't done that yet, and it is something we talk about doing. Andrew Robinson painted every single page of this book.
Sure.
Which for those of you who are listening who are, comic people, you'll know that is very rare. Painted covers are pretty standard, but painted interiors are very unusual these days. And so to have one artist paint virtually an entire book, he literally did the whole book minus the 8-page Kyle Baker sequence, is pretty extraordinary. And the canvases are gorgeous. Andrew's represented by Essential Sequential, and I highly recommend, if you've got some cash to burn, that you try to pick up some of Andrew's originals. But I was going to say, I know that Andrew is selling those pages, and they are they're gorgeous. I wish I could afford more of them myself. I did buy a handful of them.
Attaboy. Wow.
There were some that I just had to have.
Sure.
But I think, part of the idea is let's give Andrew a little bit of time to sell some of his originals before we start doing things like printing lithos and stuff. Let's let him get the originals out there to the collectors first. But you're absolutely right. The idea of making posters and special lithos of that artwork is definitely something we should do, and maybe that's the next step. It's something we haven't talked about in ages. The last time we discussed that was probably about a year ago. So
okay. Now
that you mention it, we're probably due for that conversation. So I'll keep you posted. Maybe it'll happen sooner rather than later.
Well, I'm friends with Alex Ross's art people. I know Alex has been doing some amazing Beatles stuff lately, and also to do that, he obviously has to deal with the estates of the dead Beatles, but also Ringo and Paul's people as well. So, and I don't know if you had to do that at all in terms of this whole production as well.
It's an interesting question, because we didn't. You don't need likeness rights to write a graphic novel about major public figures.
Sure.
It's and I'm not an attorney, so please, anyone who's listening, don't take this as legal advice. But it's not dissimilar to writing a biography. It's a graphic novel biography. So in the same way that a biographer should be allowed to write a biography, a graphic novel biographer should similarly be allowed to do a biography through pictures. So that's kind of the part of the thinking behind it, and also they are public figures. And however, if we were just blowing up like an Andrew Robinson picture of Paul and selling that as a T-shirt, then we really are making money off of Paul's likeness. A better argument could be made that that's not really selling the artwork. But I'm pretty sure we could reproduce a poster of the cover of the book that says the fifth Beatle on it. It looks exactly like the cover, in which case we're selling our book, and we're not really, I believe, again, I'm no attorney, but I believe the test is what they call confusion in the marketplace, which means are you possibly confusing a consumer into thinking that they are buying a Beatles product? If we're selling a Paul McCartney image on a T-shirt, might a Paul McCartney fan think that they are buying an official Paul McCartney thing from Paul?
Sure.
And if that's possible, then we're making money off of Paul.
I understand.
But if clearly we're selling something that's tied to the Fifth Beatle graphic novel, like the cover of the book, or a poster, signed by Andrew Robinson, then my understanding is that we don't need permission. Alex Ross, on the other hand, his work. And it's gorgeous work. But his work was directly with the Beatles. I mean, I'm pretty sure they commissioned him, to do that work. So it's kind of a different thing, whereas what we would be doing is coming directly from a story that was about the band. Whereas, Alex was doing sort of individual pinup type work for the Beatles. So it's a little bit of a different process.
No, I hear you, man. But I just think as a Beatles fan as well, the Cavern Club scenes are just so beautiful that Andrew was able to do. Kyle's Filipino stuff is really great too.
Totally.
The Philippine scenes, because and again, sadly old enough to remember those Beatles cartoons in syndication after the fact in the 70s.
Yeah.
But I watched those, and really that's a crazy story in itself as well, in terms of ABC being excited to get the Beatles, but I don't know what animation company, I forget which one they specifically worked with. I think it was the same company that ended up doing the Jackson 5 cartoons back in the 70s as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Very limited animation. I mean, literally, thank God they had the rights to use the Beatles songs in the cartoons. I mean, it's bad. But again, it's the Beatles, and it is what they put out there. And again, not to confuse it with Yellow Submarine, which was very artistic. And I think one of the last deals that Epstein did before he passed away was to commission Yellow Submarine as an animated film.
That's absolutely right. In fact, the Beatles weren't terribly keen on it, which is why they don't, the voices aren't actually the Beatles.
Yeah.
They hired guys who kind of sounded like them.
Kind of.
And then, and then when the movie was done, the Beatles sort of saw it and they were like, wow, this is actually really cool. And so they filmed that little moment, there's a little moment of the Beatles where they appear at the very end. But it's another moment where Brian was visionary. Brian saw that with the right team and done in a sort of serious, sophisticated way, that movie would push boundaries. And the Beatles only sort of saw it after the fact.
I noticed in your
pretty cool story.
I noticed in your acknowledgments at the beginning of the book, you mentioned Queenie Epstein. And who's Queenie?
Yeah.
Tell us about Queenie.
So Queenie is Brian's mom. So I dedicated this book to Brian's mom and to my mom. So it's for the mothers.
Oh, that's nice. The two moms. That's very cool.
Brian died at the age of 32, and Queenie Epstein, her name was Malka, which is loosely translated as Queen. So that's where the nickname Queenie came from.
Very cool.
It's terribly tragic. Her story. I mean, she literally buried both of her sons and her husband. Brian's father died a few months before he did, and Brian's brother Clive died. He lived a longer life, but he died also, a few decades ago.
Yeah, but a mother to have to bury their son, that's the worst.
Awful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, I'm a dad now. I can't even. I can't even say it. I mean, it's horrifying.
I understand that. No, I totally understand.
But she buried both of her boys and her husband. I mean, it's incredibly, just like a Greek tragedy in some ways.
I hear you. No, I definitely hear you.
And she was a remarkable woman, and so I want and I think that in her lifetime, she never saw her son Brian get the credit that he deserved. And she was incredibly proud of him. And so I thought that part of the mission of the Fifth Beatle is to give Brian the credit that he deserves, and in some ways I wanted to do that for his mom.
I hear you.
And my mom passed away, and unfortunately, she died before she saw me start my own company and sort of chase my own dreams. And so, wherever she is, I hope she's looking down too. And she was the person that introduced me to the Beatles. She was a massive Beatles fan.
That's cool.
And literally, and comics as well. My earliest memories of reading are sitting on my mom's lap reading Tintin books.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So my
cool.
mom's spirit is in this book too. So
that's beautiful, man. Very, very nice. No, it's an incredible story, and again, I don't think unless you really are a huge Beatle guy there or woman that really kind of sniffs around and really gets the backstory. We talked about this I think when we first spoke. There aren't that many good Epstein biographies out there. And I think, thankfully, your book is a good contribution in that respect.
Thank you. I mean, literally, The Fifth Beatle is the only book about Brian Epstein in print, like graphic novel or otherwise. It's the only one.
Really? Wow.
I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Because
the only other one to talk about is a book called The Man Who Made the Beatles by Ray Coleman, which is wonderful.
Okay.
It's been out of print for several decades. You can find it now fairly easily on Amazon Marketplace or
because I thought
any number of used book websites.
I thought I had before our conversation, but okay, and I didn't remember its scarcity or the fact. So why do you think this was? Any ideas?
It's The Man Who Made the Beatles it is a wonderful book, and anyone who's interested in Brian's life, it's a must read. But Ray Coleman, he also admits in his introduction to the book that he was a close friend of Brian's, and he says the book is not unbiased. It's written by somebody who knew the man and protected his legacy and loved him very dearly. And obviously, you just need to get a few pages in or spend 5 minutes hanging out with me to know that Brian is a hero of mine, and I describe him as my historical mentor. So certainly, I'm not unbiased either. But I did my best to tell what I think is a fair and honest portrayal of the man, a warts and all portrayal, if you will. And when I use the word, I say he's my historical mentor. That's how I think of him. I'm not a Brian Epstein fan. I think I'm a Brian Epstein mentee, and I think like any good mentor, what you do with your mentors is you learn what to do from them and also what not to do. Mentors are human, and you learn from their mistakes and their failings. And I think Brian had a number of them, and I try to learn from those as well. And, so The Fifth Beatle, really, it's unusual in that sense that it's written by someone like me, someone who learned about Brian after the fact and was able to kind of approach his life from a place of, I think, respect and in some ways awe, but also some degree of impartiality because I wasn't there. These are revelations for me. And I think my discovery process really, I hope if I've done my job correctly, those revelations for me feel like revelations for the readers. I hope that shows through in the work. And I certainly know Andrew and Kyle tried to capture that revelatory sense of what was happening in that era through their artwork.
So how do you try to get inside, his head then? With limited access. What did you do research-wise to bring him to life?
I had no choice but to do interviews. I discovered the Brian Epstein story in 1991 when I entered business school. So this was long before I was writing comic scripts and screenplays and teleplays and all that sort of thing. I was just a student looking for inspiration. I wasn't, I was dreaming of a life in the arts and entertainment industries. The Wharton School of Business, where I was at school in 1991, didn't have a lot of resources for kids who wanted to be involved in the arts. That's changed, but that, now the school does, to give it its credit.
That's cool.
But back then it did not. And so I had to study this stuff on my own. And I was stunned to find, as I just said, that there were no books about Brian. That one book, The Man Who Made the Beatles, in 1991, you couldn't find it easily. There were no used book websites that you could just, surf over to and buy the book. And also in 1991, there's no Wikipedia. There's no YouTube. There's no Google. Let's put these things in full perspective, And so literally, I had no choice but to read all the respected Beatles books I could get. And, I'd read these 200, 300-page books about the Beatles, and I'd maybe get 10 pages about Brian.
Okay.
Pages that I would later learn were full of, half-truths and misinformation. But what I did get was I painted a picture in my head of the people who knew him best. His friends, his allies, his family, his enemies, his clients, his coworkers, etc. And then I literally just cold called them. I tracked down the people, and especially the ones who were living within, driving distance of New York, which was home, and Philadelphia, where I was at school. So people that I could actually sit down with. And I just cold called them, and I said, I'm a student who's been inspired by the little bit he knows about Brian, and I'm trying to learn more, and will you talk to me? People like Nat Weiss, who was the Beatles' U.S. attorney and Brian's best friend and closest confidant. Sid Bernstein, the legendary concert promoter who worked with Brian to bring the Beatles over to the U.S. for the first time. I literally just called these folks, and not one of them turned me down. They all said, no problem, come and meet with us. We'd be happy to talk to you about Brian.
That's excellent. How many?
It was wonderful.
How many artists, like Billy J. Kramer, obviously writing the foreword for the book and everything? Did you get to talk to him extensively?
Oh, very much so. I mean, Billy is somebody that I'm very, very pleased to say, proud to say, that has become a very dear friend of mine. I've had so many late night conversations with Billy about Brian. I mean, he has been invaluable to me in my studies of Brian. Quite frankly, Billy's also been a big champion of Brian's legacy. I mean, but he started his intro, as I said earlier, by saying that he was baffled that Brian hadn't been inducted, and Billy was really, for years, has been leading a very vocal charge to get Brian inducted. So God bless Billy J. Kramer. He's a wonderful, wonderful human being.
That's awesome. What does it look like when you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Is it like Cooperstown for baseball? Is there like a big, kind of plaque area?
Yeah, I mean, there is I haven't been in years to the museum, but there is a Brian Epstein exhibit, and in which with all sorts of Brian Epstein memorabilia. And I have to tell you, sort of a cool story. I had heard when I started to do my Brian Epstein research when I was just a student, several years into it, I had heard that Jude Law was planning to make a film about Brian, and he's a huge Beatles fan. He was actually named after the song Hey Jude. And I remembered, this was, some 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I was thinking at the time, Jude had done Cold Mountain and Talented Mr. Ripley, and he was perfect for Brian. I remember thinking, my God, he'd be amazing. I hope he doesn't screw it up, And then a good, 10 or 15 years had passed, and all of a sudden I wasn't a student anymore. I had success in the theater industry. I had produced Raisin in the Sun. I had worked on Mel Brooks' The Producers, and I was looking for my next project, and I was proud of A Raisin in the Sun, but it was a revival, a classic piece of African American literature.
Absolutely,
totally. So I produced a version that had Sean Combs or P. Diddy in it.
Oh, fantastic! That's awesome.
Yeah, that was mine. And then in the wake of that, I thought, what's the next story I want to tell? And I thought I want to tell a new story, a story that hasn't been told before. And I realized it was the Brian Epstein story. And I thought, nobody's told it yet. Jude Law hasn't told his version yet. So, why not me? Like now I'm not just a kid with studying anymore. I'm a respected, theater producer, and I should just do this, right? And so I reached out to Jude Law, to see if, where he was at, and could we join forces maybe. And, he and his reps confirmed to me that he still, cared about Brian and the Beatles legacy, but he'd moved on. He was not interested in playing Brian anymore.
Okay.
And so Jude, I wouldn't say that we became buddies, but we began to be friendly and had an open line of communication. And I had learned that over the course of his, preparing to potentially play this role, he had purchased at auction a series of Brian's diaries, to do some research.
Wow.
And so when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was inducting Brian, I called Jude Law and I said, hey, I know you bought these diaries. I know you care about Brian, but you're not really a collector per se. How would you feel about donating those diaries to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? It'll have a little plaque that says, from the collection of Jude Law, which is kind of cool.
Absolutely.
And this way, anyone who wants to see them will be able to go to the Rock Hall and request a look.
Wow.
And Jude, of course, said, sure, that's a great idea, no problem. And so, because of my relationship with Jude Law, which started out in a sort of like, I wonder if we're going to be competing, I wonder if we can collaborate. And, years later, we're friendly enough that that's the reason that Brian's diaries are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's just kind of a cool thing,
Absolutely.
I am a big believer that there isn't really, that it's foolish to try to compete when two people are interested in the same thing, that you're better served, trying to collaborate and join forces, and, what's the phrase, the rising tide raises all ships. I've always been a big believer in that. And, I could have, in those days, tried to say, I'm going to stay away from Jude and just try to do it first. And, instead I was like, man, let me give him a call and see whether we can do it together. And that didn't work out. But years later, it resulted in this wonderful, wonderful relationship. So,
no, that's awesome, man. That's a very superhero attitude as well. We should join forces.
I think so.
And overcome
Thanks,
the obstacles.
brother.
That's awesome, man. Excellent. Hey, so what was it like working with Mel Brooks on The Producers?
It was my first experience working on Broadway, so what an amazing first experience to have. Let me be honest, my role in the show was very small, but the lead producers on that show really took me under their wing in a sort of mentoring capacity, which was wonderful. I got to attend meetings I probably shouldn't have been allowed to attend, be on calls that I shouldn't have been on, mostly because, as I said, I kept my mouth shut and my eyes and ears open, and I learned how to produce. So I want to be honest, I didn't have lengthy, back and forths with Mel, but I certainly got to watch him in action, and he is a force of nature. He is everything you'd want him to be. He's very friendly, very funny, very much like your wild, funny, great uncle, the
Sure.
crazy great Uncle Mel. I mean, that's kind of what he's like. But he's also, he knows his stuff, and he's very demanding and very professional. Like when he has an idea that he thinks is the right idea, he'll fight for it. And if the producers want to do something differently, you better have a damn good reason and a damn good explanation as to why. And he wasn't stubborn. Like if you did have that good explanation, he'd listen. But he was the real deal, man. I got very lucky in some ways that my first exposure to theater production was working with him because it was an amazing learning experience and really set the template for everything that I've done since then.
So what's happening now and again, because you made a great graphic novel, and I do want to stress that
Thank you.
It is a great product unto itself. But that said, this is a great story, and I do think that it's a story that should be told beyond, the graphic novel audience. And I know this is one of your ambitions to turn it into something bigger.
So we're expanding the Fifth Beatle right now into a television event series. It's going to be 6 one-hour episodes. For those of you who've been following the book for several years, you'll know this is a bit of a shift. For a number of years, we were developing it as a film, but I think the television industry has changed radically in the past several years, and there's just some fantastic work being done in television. And to use House of Cards as an example, there was a period when I think David Fincher and Kevin Spacey wouldn't have even considered doing anything in television.
Sure.
And and now all the great actors and great directors are doing television work. So it's a very, very exciting time. And for someone like me who's spent literally more than half of his life, 25 plus years researching Brian's life, I have so much information about the guy. So the idea of having a 6-hour canvas in which to tell that story, is truly a dream come true. I very specifically wanted to keep the graphic novel to about 120, 130 pages. I think it came in at 128. And I wanted to do that because I wanted our readers to feel like they could pick it up and read it in a couple of hours, depending on how fast you read.
Okay.
That it would feel like watching a movie in some ways, that you could read it before your flight landed if you're on a short flight.
Good point.
That I kept thinking about the person who's not a huge Beatles fan or not a huge comic fan who just picks it up and sees that, especially with the paperback, it's, $14.99. It's not too expensive. The artwork is beautiful. The story sounds intriguing. It won't take too long to read. You might just give it a shot. That was a big, big thing for me. And a film would have similarly been 2 hours long. I think it would have made an amazing film, but it would probably have had to tread very similar ground to the graphic novel. But now that we have 6 hours, we can get very deeply into a whole number of stories that we weren't able to tell in the graphic novel. To really use a comic book term, in some ways you could think of the graphic novel as setting the Brian Epstein universe, and now in the television series we'll be populating that universe with more characters and more stories.
Very good.
Very good. To give you 2 immediate examples, Pete Best. Pete Best was the drummer before Ringo Starr, and he was the drummer that Brian had to fire as one of his first responsibilities as manager. And we made a conscious decision, or I should blame myself, give myself that credit or that blame. I'd made a conscious decision that we were not going to tell the Pete Best story in the graphic novel. I wanted to keep the book short, and I thought that, in order to tell the Pete Best story, you would need to not just tell the story, but explain why, Pete was and is, he's still very much alive, a lovely human being. He's a lovely man. And I wanted, if you're going to tell that story of Brian firing Pete, you need to let the readers care about Pete, as they should.
Sure.
And so, to me, that's 3 or 4 pages about Pete to make your readers care, 3 or 4 pages about, how that happened, and then, how the firing happened and why, and then 3 or 4 pages of the aftermath. And so that's like 10 or 12 pages? That's a lot in a 120-page graphic novel to spend about 10 pages on Pete Best. So we made the decision not to do it. And it always bothered me. To this day, I'm not sure it was the right decision, but it was my decision. But lo and behold, we now have 6 hours. And I can tell you in the pilot episode, which I finished writing, I'm writing the teleplays myself.
Fantastic.
The pilot episode, Pete Best is a major character.
I would think so. Sure.
So we're really, really excited about that. It really is not going to be a carbon copy of the graphic novel. It's the best, in when I have 2 seconds to describe it, I'll say we're adapting the graphic novel because that's easy for people to understand.
Sure.
But it's not an adaptation. It is an expansion. And I'm super excited about it. The Beatles are fully supportive of it. Paul, Ringo, Yoko Ono, and Olivia Harrison have signed off on it and have allowed us to do a deal with Sony ATV, which is a long-winded way of saying we have access to Beatles music for the television series. It's a huge coup for us.
Indeed.
It's the first time the band has ever granted unrestricted access to their catalog to a television show, or a film for that matter. So it's a huge honor.
Jeez.
And for anyone who's listening and wants to get cutting edge news on it, please follow us on Twitter. We're at Fifth Beatle. We're also on Facebook, and we have a mailing list at fifthbeatle.com. I expect as I mentioned earlier, the pilot script is just completed, and I expect within the next few months we're going to be announcing our director, we'll be announcing our lead actor, and we will be announcing our network, where you'll be able to see the darn thing. We have done a deal with a company called Sonar Entertainment that are well-respected TV financiers and producers. So this is not just something that I'm dreaming about. It's actually something that is very much happening and actively in development. So please stay tuned for some creative announcements shortly.
Excellent. I am on your mailing list, and I'm glad to hear that things have progressed on the TV side. Because that's great. No, it's a wonderful, interesting story. Again, given the environment we are currently living in, it has become a timely story again, I think, in a lot of ways. And at its heart, as you say, it's a guy who wouldn't take no for an answer within his own career and also what he saw in this band. And you've got to give him his due for for really knocking down these obstacles and getting the Beatles to where they were. I mean, he was literally instrumental in making a lot of this happen. And I think it is. It's an excellent story. Did you interview? I'm assuming you did interview Pete Best extensively.
I have not had extensive interactions with Pete Best, because he was not a part of the graphic novel. But that's going to change now that we're getting to the film side of things.
That's cool, man.
So I've met Pete, but I'm going to answer your question honestly. I've not had extensive interviews with him, but I have met him, and we'll need more of him as the television show plays on. That's
really cool. It's funny. I just was talking to another young creator who wanted to write something about Mort Weisinger as the Superman editor at DC from the 50s through the very early 70s. And he's like, do you know who you can talk to about that, or who I could talk to? And I said, well, I can kind of come up with a list, but you got to remember that literally it's been 45 years since he stopped editing Superman. So I don't know who's left. We're down 2 Beatles, unfortunately. Are there enough people to still research and get firsthand knowledge in this era?
It's an excellent question. And, over the course of doing this, a number of them have passed away. I mentioned Sid Bernstein and Nat Weiss, who were 2 invaluable resources to me for the graphic novel, and they passed.
I wasn't sure if Mr. Kramer was still around, if Billy J. Kramer was still around.
Billy is very much alive and very active. In fact, if you go to billyjkramer.com, you'll see he's still making music. He's actually in the process of recording a new record.
Oh, that's great.
He tours from time to time. He's amazing.
Very cool.
He went through bad periods like a lot of rockers did, and now he's totally sober. And his last record was called "I Won the Fight."
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's what's that about. He is a survivor. That guy. He's amazing.
Very cool.
He really is a true inspiration.
You got to get that. You can if you need to.
No, that's actually not me. I think that's my wife's phone.
Okay.
So I'm sorry if that's
not at all.
See if I can,
No, that's audio verte, as I like to say when real life intervenes. That's okay, man. Not at all. We roll with it. It's all good. Man.
But yeah, and look, for me, one of the great joys of being able to continue working on this project is to start talking to people that I missed the first time around.
Sure.
And also, as Brian Epstein's story gets more and more in the public eye, and also as, as the world changes and it is a more accepting place than it was, 10 years ago and even maybe than it was 3 years ago. Let's, as a quick aside, let's hope we keep moving in that direction.
Indeed. Absolutely.
But we have been moving in that direction. And there are a number of people who had material or information or stories about Brian that were just kind of keeping their mouths shut, for fear that it wouldn't go over well or no one would care or it was controversial. And now those people are sort of, picking up the phone or sending me an email or shooting me a note saying, hey, do you know about this guy or I had this experience or let me tell you a story about Brian that I've never told or I have a letter that I've never shared or, so the research goes on because new stuff is coming up all the time. So, your point is valid on one hand. The world is losing a lot of these people, and now is the time. But I've also noticed that as more and more stuff happens, more stuff comes to light because more people are opening their archives, if you will,
Sure. No, that's
and
great.
Certainly the folks who are getting older are more willing to talk now than ever. I mean, I think Sid and Nat, rest their souls. They're not here to speak for themselves, but I'm fairly certain that part of why they opened up to me is because they realized that they were getting old. And if they didn't tell their stories to somebody like me who cared, some of those stories would have gotten lost in time.
Indeed. It's got to be great. And I know in my own limited experience, working on some historic stories in my radio side of my career and stuff, I did an audio documentary about Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney and their Soldier Field fight. Back then it was 75 years ago. It's been about 80 years since then. But saying that, you do feel like Clark Kent, don't you, in terms of pursuing these stories? I mean, it's kind of fun. There is that investigative.
Oh, it's what a joy. I mean, there are days where I'm just like, I can't believe this is what I do for a living. I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Hey, keep it up. Continued success. The expanded paperback version of The Fifth Beatle is out. It is indeed. It came out this month, correct?
It did. It came out at the end of October, so actually end of last month. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So perfect time. If you didn't get it the first time around, excellent gift for a Beatle fan.
Thank you so much.
A tremendous graphic novel, and very excited about the prospects of a limited television series to expand the story and get more information on this really important chapter in the LGBT community and also in rock history as well. So Vivek Tiwary giving Brian Epstein his due in The Fifth Beatle. So congratulations. And hey, man, I told you this the first time, and I mean it. Anytime, you're welcome back. Let's talk more. I didn't even ask you about doing the Harveys. So
oh my gosh,
you kicked ass doing the Harveys. If you want to go on about that for a second.
Thank you so much for saying so. It was talk about surreal dreams come true. My gosh, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up reading comics, and these comic legends are really my childhood superheroes. So the creators were my real heroes. So to be able to host the Harvey Awards and get to meet and honor a great number of them was just, I did it twice. My gosh, 2 nights of my life that I will never, ever forget.
That's awesome, man.
It was a real honor and a real joy.
Yeah, well, bad news, man. You're in the nerd club now, so you're one of us, and that's good.
I've always been in that club,
absolutely.
Man. But thank you. It's nice to be here. This is family. I mean, I said it earlier. When I go to strange towns, I'll seek out the comic book store because it'll be a place where I'll immediately won't be lonely.
No, and
we are family.
Well, I've experienced it firsthand. Every time I've seen you've given me a nice hug, so I always appreciate that.
Thanks, brother.
No, absolutely, man. No, come back, and really, I hope you will come back as this develops and evolves because I do want to hear more, and I am. I mean, I talked to a lot of the comic people who are now experiencing, the television side. I know you come from the theater side as well, but I think this is interesting times, and I think also nice to see beyond the success that DC and Marvel and some of the others are having with the fiction that they're able to bring from comics to the other mediums and stuff. It's nice to see the true life stories that start as graphic novels and have that experience as well. So,
totally.
So yeah, if you're willing to share, you've always got a corner here to talk about it.
I would love to, and we will have television news to share soon. So I would love to do that. And I will quickly say, I love working in television, and I'm super excited about it. But I adore comics, and I'm not leaving the comic world behind.
Excellent.
And I believe the pub date is going to be March. I'm doing a Star Trek one-shot,
hey, that's
which
great.
I'm really stoked about.
Nice going.
And I just started working on my next graphic novel. which is a follow-up of sorts to the Fifth Beatle. In some ways, you could almost think of it as a prequel. And the tentative title is A Mess of Blues, the Colonel Parker and Elvis Presley story.
Fantastic!
So
wow.
So we're getting into Colonel Parker next.
Man, I saw that. I saw that Jerry Weintraub documentary he made before he passed away, and even just that little bit of him talking about the 70s Elvis tours and working directly with the Colonel. That guy's
crazy, right?
Yeah, crazy, fascinating guy. Even a crazier story than the unfortunate things that Epstein had to go through. I mean, literally, Colonel Tom Parker is a carny who became a multi-million-dollar guy, but I don't think the carny side of his life ever left.
Yeah, oh, totally. And I don't know if you know the whole story. He was born in the Netherlands. His real name was Andres van Kuijek. He did something criminal in the Netherlands. We're not really sure. He may have murdered someone.
Wow.
He literally faked his death, stowed away on a ship, washed up in America, gave himself the name Tom Parker because it was kind of a blah, unknown name, joined the carnival because no one in the carnival cares about your history.
Yep.
And completely reinvented himself.
There you go, man. No, I knew.
And a large part of the reason Elvis never toured outside of the United States was because Parker wouldn't let him do it alone, and Parker couldn't leave because he wasn't Parker.
I did know that. I did know that there was some
story.
Yep, cloudy European things that kept Colonel Parker from
It's an insane story. I mean, ultimately, Parker was his own greatest con.
Indeed.
Colonel Tom, and he wasn't a colonel. That was completely made up. He was his own ultimate con. It's an amazing story.
That's
and
fantastic.
it's funny. I've been resisting telling it because it doesn't. I don't.
Yes,
if anyone who's read the Fifth Beatle will tell you I don't have a lot of respect for the guy.
No, I'm laughing because of the audacity of the man. And no, he's a terrible man. Absolutely,
terrible human being. But
really,
a lot to be learned from his story.
I'm sure. Oh my God, and totally screwed over Elvis. My God, in so many ways. Here, Elvis, here's a handful of quarters. While I'm stacking the bills, the dollar bills in the back and everything.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, look, on one hand, there's no question that the guy, his marketing savvy and his business genius, made Elvis what he turned Elvis from a country music bumpkin to like a massive international pop culture icon. But at the same time, he destroyed him. I mean, he made him and unmade him.
Agreed.
It's a remarkable story.
Oh, man, dude. Oh, well, there's your next limited television series.
We'll see. Thanks, brother.
No, that's great.
No, it's funny you say that because in a lot of ways, in the television industry, they don't like the term limited series. They now use the term event series.
Sure.
And part of the reason is because if the limited series does well, they're like maybe there's a second season to be had.
That's true.
So when we talk about this, they're like what happens if the Fifth Beatle does great? What's the next season? And my answer to that question is that we think of the Fifth Beatle, as season one of a larger anthology series. The tentative title I have for that is On the Shoulders of Giants. And the second season would be Colonel Parker.
Oh, dude.
And then maybe after that we get into Andrew Loog Oldham and the Rolling Stones. And
there you go.
Peter Grant and Led Zeppelin and Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols. And, you just kind of keep going. And really, Brian's the guy that started it, right? Brian was there at the beginning, and the rest of the guys kind of laid down the template, sort of picked up on his template.
Man. No, that's fantastic, and you're right. And coming from music radio, I know a lot of the stories as well, and I think there's a lot of good stuff there.
Oh man, it's stranger than fiction,
That's
great. It's like
man.
You watch vinyl and you're like, they created this like murder and like all this crazy stuff happened, and I'm like. And I keep thinking, like, why are you creating all this stuff? Just tell the Peter Grant story if you want sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
No shit.
I mean, my God, you don't have to make this stuff up.
I agree. It reminds me of in the 80s when they would do, like, miniseries and, like, James Michener's Space, and it wasn't really what happened during the Mercury program and Gemini and stuff, and it was kind of loosely based. And it's like, oh, you're close, but you're not. And I even questioned some of the real things that were in there that I didn't realize that, DJs spinning and mixing and stuff was happening as early as 1973 because it had that feeling of fake history. So I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm like, aren't they a little off? And of course, my New York friends corrected me, and I'm like, no, that's when it was happening. And I'm like, okay, fine. But again, they were making stuff up, and it's a shame because I really wanted to like that series, and it's a missed opportunity. But truth is stranger than fiction, and you're You're cherry picking the good stuff. So
yeah,
you got a good plan, dude. That's nice.
Thank you.
Excellent, hilarious, man. I'm telling you, that's really, really cool. Nice going,
Thank you, my
Vivek.
friend.
Keep it up, man.
Thank you.
And yeah, please check in the future, and we'll do this again.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
That's Vivek Tiwary. Check out the fifth Beatle from Dark Horse Comics, and let's all look forward to that event television series, hopefully coming up very soon. Very excited about that for Vivek, and looking forward to checking in with him again in the future. Today's episode is brought to you by Geek Fuel, a great subscription box service that ships out a mystery box each month that has at least $50 worth of value for just around $15 plus shipping and handling. Every box has an exclusive t-shirt, a full downloadable game, 5 to 7 other great geek culture items. This is a terrific Christmas gift, or consider even getting it for yourself and having several holiday and birthday gifts to share with friends for months to come. Some of the things that I got in my Geek Fuel box that I love, I have a great Firefly t-shirt of the Serenity ship, and something that I always have been bragging about for the last few weeks, and that's a kitchen board for my kitchen that is shaped like a Nintendo game cartridge. That's the thing. You get practical items from geekfuel.com that have a geek flavor to them, but you can really use as well. Another thing, a cool toothbrush holder that's shaped like a dragon's egg. You want to treat yourself and your friends to a Geek Fuel subscription box. It's a great thing that you can get monthly. There are many different plans. If you start your subscription today and include Word Balloon in the mention, you'll get a free bonus item worth $10 in your first box. The way to do that and subscribe to Geek Fuel is to go to geekfuel.com/wordballoon. All right, without further ado, let us pick up a conversation with Heath Corson. This was recorded Thanksgiving week, and a great opportunity to sit down with Heath and share some geek ideas and notions. Just a good casual conversation. We've been doing it the last couple of years at my Chicago radio studios, and I was happy to welcome Heath back to Word Balloon.
Comic books had these culture wars first. We had it before anybody. We had it down. What is Batman versus Superman in the 80s? And what is Captain America versus Iron Man? Except kind of the red-blooded red states versus the cultural elite.
Do you want to talk about this as far as that goes?
I mean, I'm happy to sort of put that theory out there because we've been sort of dealing with this for a long, long time, and we were there first.
That's interesting because I never took it that way. Let's do.
All right,
why don't we jump in? All right. See, Heath Corson already, started off with a bolt of thunder.
I shazammed you right out of the box.
Absolutely. Good to see you, man.
It's good to see you.
This is like our little, kind of Thanksgiving week tradition.
We do. I come and I visit John, and we work ourselves into lather about comic book stuff.
And it's, it's always a casual conversation. But now you bring this up, and because we're talking a little bit about the culture wars that have been going on in comics, and you make the point that that certainly Frank Miller's Dark Knight represented that, I suppose.
Certainly of the 80s in our Batman versus Superman, in the people that felt like they could work out in the light and the people that had to work in the darkness under the cover of shadow, who the justice was no longer covering.
But the political lines kind of blur.
They do blur in that,
because,
yes.
Because
who's right and who's wrong.
Well, there's that, and also, people would say that maybe Batman is a bit more conservative and take charge and do his thing.
That's right.
But then again, Superman is represented by that Reagan right.
That's right.
So it is kind of like, well, which, what side is there and everything, I don't know.
But even what I found so interesting is certainly these movies came out back to back. Batman versus Superman, and then Marvel, Captain America, Civil War.
Sure. Well, sure, this year.
And then Civil War is very, very close to our culture war with red-blooded Captain America, who is the blue-collar guy, versus our cultural elite, overeducated Tony Stark.
Cap's Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he represents the Trump side. I got to be honest with you.
No, but I just think it's interesting that in comics we've been wrestling with these thoughts for a while now.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't new to us, and it's interesting because we've always had these characters tear each other apart, and yet come together and work together and find common ground again. So it's interesting to see the culture wars rumbling, and the comic book guys to sort of go, oh, you guys are a little behind the mark here. We're already at the part where, when Titans clash, where they fought, and now we're coming back together.
But that's the thing. I think in the Silver Age, I don't think Stan was thinking, what's great is I got my conservative on this side, I got my liberal on this side.
I didn't know you're doing voices now.
So, no, I've always done them, actually.
You do voices
I do them more when I'm with the Tiny Titans guys, with Art and Franco.
That's amazing.
But I can't deny, and certainly, we started doing Trump, when it came out, when he started running for president.
Sure.
And then I would do, I like the Legion of Doom. I'm considering them for my cabinet.
Yes.
I'm going to have Dr. Light come in, and I think he might be good for Department of Energy.
We're really looking at Solomon Grundy to run the interior. We think he's going to be fantastic. I love the man. He's born on a Monday. Everybody knows this.
You got to clean the swamp. Who do you go to if you can't get Alec Holland?
Killer Croc.
Exactly.
You get Killer Croc, because once you get him out of the swamp swamp's pretty much clean because it's all stuck on him.
But I don't think it was till the 80s that politics, because also you can look at Gruenwald's Squadron Supreme.
Right.
And that's a very political book.
We touched on this, I think, the last time I was here, and I was not in the know how far forward thinking that book was.
Oh, yeah.
Until I just sort of read it again recently.
Sure.
And it is, it left me, it was shocking.
Well,
it's shocking how smart it is. I mean, it's Watchmen before Watchmen, isn't it?
That's a good question. I think I was going to say, I think it's around the same time.
I think it is around the same time.
And we had so many poor imitations of Dark Knight and Watchmen.
Right.
And I think Squadron Supreme very quietly, because it was a C-level book anyway.
Yeah.
But it was a good book.
So smart and really played to what happens when these people who want to do good really start doing bad in order to do good.
Sure.
And the lines just get blurred. And it's a smart book. I would say if people haven't seen that, check it out. I do know it's on the Unlimited. It's on Marvel Unlimited.
Sure.
Fantastic.
I have that as well.
Yeah,
I love it. I just had Charles Soule on.
Oh, yeah.
And he really kind of...
That guy.
I know, his million books. But I had to confess that I really hadn't been reading the Inhumans. And he really went chapter and verse of what he's been doing in the Inhumans. I'm like, I'm read that. That's
yeah,
really,
no,
and I'm really glad I have Marvel Unlimited.
He's a smart guy. I'm digging his Daredevil. It's
fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Absolutely. No, and that's another thing. Hey, way to go, coming up with a new wrinkle for Daredevil.
No kidding.
Coming off of Wade and Somni and Bendis and Brubaker and all the good people that have been writing Daredevil in the shadow of Miller.
Yeah.
And really starting with, bringing back the Miller style and stuff.
Can I tell you that nothing makes me more angry than when you get this great run of a character and then the next guy comes on and you just go, good luck with that, dude. Well, and then they do it.
Well, that's good, because I was going to say there was one run in there, and I won't be mean.
There's a couple.
I don't think so. And I checked out for a while.
Not everybody scales the bar every time. But if you're... Look, if you're Scott Snyder and you're coming after Morrison, what are the odds you're going to be great?
Yeah,
and
but
then
that detective run, the Black Mirror story that he did with Jock and with Francesco Francavilla, while Morrison was doing the Batman Robin stuff and everything. I mean, that's the thing. So, they were actually
I'm
DC.
saying he did it.
Yeah.
He killed it.
Yeah.
Him and Capullo killed it.
Yeah, but I'm saying as opposed to, when he and Capullo were announced, so it's like, we already knew that.
We already knew that. So
Scott
he's
write
great.
Batman
He's unbelievable. And then they get Tom King, and you go, oh, geez, Tom, how are you? And Tom's unbelievable.
I know, I'm so happy for Tom. I'm
so angry at those guys because they're so good. Sewell's one of those guys like that, and is the nicest guy in the world.
Oh yeah, Sewell's awesome. He's great.
They're all just
same with King. I mean, and that's why I was very happy for Tom. Because,
and you know what, Tom deserves it.
Oh,
and
great guy.
If you guys aren't reading Vision, go get Vision.
Honestly, best maxi series.
I would agree.
Of the year.
Oh, easily
my favorite Marvel book, hands down.
Yep, I would agree with that.
It was
Omega
excellent.
Men.
Sheriff
of Babylon.
Sheriff of Babylon is terrific.
The guy,
absolutely,
so angry.
Yeah,
so angry at that guy. No, he deserves it. He deserves it. He's so good.
That's awesome.
I think that guy's a rising star over there.
Oh, I think he's hit his groove. I think he's doing just fine.
So you mentioned Sewell's Daredevil, which I think is fantastic.
Yes.
I think he's great. Almost as good as his She-Hulk. I love when Charles gets to write lawyers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I did ask him at one point. I was like, and this was before I think we saw Daredevil versus She-Hulk in a court of law. And I said, legally, what kind of lawyer is Jen and what kind of lawyer is Matt Murdock? And he was able to go like, this is the kind of thoughtful lawyer that Murdock is. This is the kind of lawyer that Jen Walters is. And I was like, you're one of the few people that can actually give me chapter and verse from the
law perspective.
Perspective.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree.
So I thought that was fascinating.
No, everything Charles has written. I loved his Swamp Thing.
Yes.
That was really good.
Yes.
While Snyder was doing, was Snyder doing Animal Man?
Yeah.
Jesus. Unbelievable
come
stuff.
on, guys.
And Lemire.
Leave a little for the rest of us.
Well, speaking of which, you and Gustavo, your Bizarro collaborator, have got something coming out in just a couple of weeks.
We do. We have a story in the new. It's the DC Rebirth Holiday Special, which has got, I think it's like an 80-page giant. I think it's got a ton of stories in it, including, and I don't think I'm talking out of turn here, Paul Dini did the wraparounds with Harley Quinn.
Fantastic.
And we are doing Detective Chimp, teaming up with Batman.
That's excellent.
So it's big fun. So it's hard-boiled detective. It's the first time we've seen Detective Chimp in
Rebirth.
A while in Rebirth. I think since Willingham.
I was going to say Willingham's group. What were they called?
Shadow Pact.
Yeah, Shadow Pact.
I think this is the first time you've seen Bobo since Shadow Pact.
That's fantastic. Other than the Brave and Bold cartoon.
That's right.
So,
and I think people are going to get a big kick out of it. Gustavo's Bobo is great.
Does he speak in your
He does speak.
Okay, very good.
Not only does he speak, but we do the whole thing in Sam Spade voiceover.
As well.
So it's a lot of Bogart. And
that kind of fits.
Yeah, of course. So we get the whole
Poor
voiceover.
Bogart, as he got older, he got very chimp-like. Yeah. That's true. And I'm a massive Bogart fan.
Me too.
Oh, man.
So we get to do the whole film noir voiceover.
Hilarious.
And it's really a ton of fun. It's a big, fun story called The Night We Saved Christmas. So I'm excited for people to come check that out. Buy it. Tell them that you want more. We'd love to play more with Detective Chimp.
It would be great to see a Detective Chimp miniseries of him traveling around the DCU.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems right in our strike zone.
Totally, man. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you guys are you and Gustavo are a great team. That Bizarro.
Oh, he's the best.
Bizarro and Jimmy.
And we wrote this one together, which was really fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was really
Wow.
fun. Gustavo wanted to do layouts, and so we got to jump on the Skype and talk a lot about what we wanted to do. And,
that's cool.
It's real fun.
That's excellent,
real
man.
fun.
10-page story, you said?
It's a 10-page story.
That's cool. You know, I liked, and I think they did them about 5 or 6. It was pre-Flashpoint. But they did several 80-page giants where they would do big anthologies and stuff.
And give people just a shot at, like, playing with characters and see what grabbed.
I remember, oh, God, and now I'm blanking. Shame on me. The Immermans, Stuart and Catherine. And if Stuart didn't draw it, then I know Catherine wrote it.
Okay.
And it was the most charming Lois and Clark story where Lois has the flu, and literally Clark is just trying to do whatever he can to make her feel better. And he's
amazing.
And it's great because it's just them. So, there's no pretense of him having to be bumbling.
I love that.
But the fact that deep down, there's a lot of Clark Kent and Superman, and it's fantastic. And she is just like, you idiot. I'm okay. Just let me sleep. And he really is kind of tripping over himself trying to help her. It's great.
That's adorable.
But that's what you can do with 10 pages. Nice little character slice.
I pitched a Perry White 10-pager.
Okay.
Where basically my take was Perry is Mike Royko. For Chicago guys, because I grew up reading Royko, and I was like, Perry was really important to Metropolis.
Oh, no, I think that's a good
And he's
comparison.
a columnist.
Jimmy Breslin in New York is a good example.
Like a guy who just really had the heartbeat of the city,
Yeah.
and then got moved to this position where he's a desk jockey now.
Right.
And it's sort of bumming him out. So it's basically Perry White getting back to his roots.
Oh, that's cool.
And I had a lot. I pitched that one. I hope that maybe some point we'll get to do it. But it's a really fun story to just be able to, as a guy who grew up reading Royko, I was like, this is a guy who has a lot to say. And he's wasted as the editor. Feels wasted, feels like he's not doing good. And then it's sort of his arc of coming back into realizing, oh no, this is the right job for me. This is where I can make a difference.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a neat little thing. I hope I get a chance to do that one.
That's very funny. I was telling you off the air, I was just at Myopic Books, one of my favorite bookstores in Chicago. A great used bookstore for people who might be traveling and looking for little hidden gems. In fact, Bendis, he spent a month here shooting the Powers pilot for FX that didn't get greenlit.
Okay.
And he's like, give me good bookstores. I'm like, Myopic, you're going to love it. And of course he did. But I just picked up the Royko one more time. I think it's a collection of his, the final collection of his columns and stuff. And I used the Jimmy Breslin comparison for New Yorkers. I don't know of a current kind of, spirit of the city columnist that has like the city's pulse the way Royko and Breslin did.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I don't know about that either.
And LA is so spread out. I don't know if there's a guy like that in LA.
Maybe Dan Savage in Seattle.
Okay.
Maybe. No, there's really... I wouldn't say there's a heart of somebody like that in LA as much as... everybody's got their own blogs, and you really don't know where they're coming from, where they are anymore.
Well, those kinds of writers have migrated to cyberspace. You're right about that.
So I think that there are voices, but I don't know that they're as inherently tied to a periodical or a.
And again, this was.
I'm
back
sure
in
people will correct us.
Yeah,
and bring up ideas.
Hey, seriously, like fill up the threads on Twitter or Facebook, and email me people that I'm forgetting. But no, it's true. And again, this was back in the 3-network world.
Right.
AM and FM radio were still very important. Newspapers were as important.
Yeah.
And, it's a different world now, and it's a more fragmented world. But like guys like Breslin and Royko really had the city's attention.
Yeah, they had a thing,
everything.
yeah.
So, no, I'd love to see something like that for Perry.
That was another one that I was pulling from.
I got to interview Studs a couple times. He was awesome. He was tremendous.
What an amazing guy.
Oh, yeah. And we mentioned Bogart, of course, his last film, The Harder They Fall, the boxing movie. Got to talk to Bud Schulberg about that.
Come on.
Oh, yeah, man.
What Makes Sammy Run?
Yes, indeed. And
one of my favorite books of all time.
On the waterfront as well. Mm-hmm. No, he always wanted Ben Stiller to do a movie version of What Makes Sammy Run.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, if you go back and read that book, it's all happened already. Like, all that stuff has come true.
Well,
we're so far past it.
Just like Facing the Crowd.
Yeah, just like Facing the Crowd.
And it was funny because the movie studios were talking about remaking Facing the Crowd. This is literally about 11 years ago because it's right before Tyson fought Lennox Lewis.
Uh-huh.
And I would see Burt a lot because I was still working in sports radio, so I would see him in Burt Sugar, but I would also see Bud Schulberg. And Bud and I were talking at a De La Hoya fight. And he's like, yeah, they want Jim Carrey. I'm not really crazy about that, which I thought was hilarious to be the Andy Griffith Lonesome Rhodes character. And I'm like, well, I get it. He's like, yeah, I do too. He's just a little over the top for me. He goes, I don't buy him when he does drama.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you, Bud. You've been writing screenplays and novels for 50 years. Yeah, no problem, man. No, he was amazing. He was a great dude. He was a really interesting dude. Yeah, pretty cool.
That's rad.
So, and speaking of writing, you're still Mr. Animation, and you got some cool stuff coming up.
I did. They just announced the Justice League Action Show has a release date finally, which I believe is December 16th on Cartoon Network.
Wow, that's soon. Oh, fantastic. Okay, because I saw it. I didn't see the date, but I did see that they announced it finally.
And I was really lucky to get to write on that show, and it's a big, fun show. There are 11-minute episodes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so, is it a half hour and two 11-minute stories per half hour?
It's 2 11-minute stories per half hour.
Okay.
So the theory, which was dictated from our two showrunners, which were Alan Burnett, one of the architects of Batman the Animated Series and everything that you've ever seen.
One of the greatest keepers of the DC animated universe ever, absolutely. Along with Bruce Timm, I mean,
And Jim Krieg, who has written a ton of animation.
Good for Jim Krieg, man.
Jim's a great dude.
Jim Krieg, of course, he's got a great comic book history. He did all those Earth X books with Alex Ross.
Oh, did he really?
He was the writer of Earth X and Mutant X and all those. Remember those were in the early 2000s?
Yeah.
Dougie Brathwaite took over the interiors of those books.
I knew that he worked on those.
Yeah, he worked a lot with Alex on that
stuff. So Jim and Alan really came up with this great, very cool take, as far as I know. And it's basically, we drop in the middle of the second act, and we're already hit the ground running. So there's very little, setting the stage. There's very little, here's what's going on. Boom, we're going. It's happening.
Okay.
So we jump in, and the bad guy's doing what the bad guy's doing, and we're catching up, and it works really well. The whole thing feels very breathless, which is really fun.
Yeah.
It moves. And the bench, all I can tell you is the bench is ridiculous.
The hero bench or the writer bench?
The bench of characters that we can put in the show is unbelievable.
That's fantastic.
It's unbelievable.
We're going to be excited to see all these people.
You're going to see the first 4, which are 4 11-minute episodes make up the pilot, of which I wrote 2 of them, the 2 middle ones.
Nice.
And you're not going to believe how many people we already get into it. Not to blow anything.
Unbelievable.
I'm not going to blow it.
It's excellent.
It's huge.
It's huge. You're going to love it. That's fantastic.
It's amazing.
So basically, based on that, then Chachi is going to be there.
Chachi's going to be in it.
Antonio Sabato Jr.
We've got...
I'm telling you, the Inferior 5 make their immediate... Actually, I would love to see the Inferior 5.
Can I tell you, I've been wanting to reboot the Inferior 5 forever. Did I tell you that?
No.
Oh, I had a whole take on the Inferior
Dumb Bunny
5.
and all?
Yeah.
Although you can't call her Dumb Bunny anymore because that's probably politically incorrect.
What I wanted to do was do their kids. So it's a new generation.
Oh, that's funny.
And the whole idea was basically that they're in Nebraska. And they're the coolest heroes in Nebraska.
So they're like the Great Lakes Avengers, basically.
They're like the Great Lakes Avengers, and they're so cool, they call themselves the Superior 5.
Oh, very good.
The best joke, the best character I had was Awkward Man and Dumb Bunny's kid. No, Dumb Bunny was with, it was Awkward Man's kid was named Lumberjackson.
Okay.
Was a huge lumberjack guy.
Lovely.
Named Lumberjackson. Which I thought was awesome. And he was cool. He wore the flannel and had the big beard. And,
very good.
The slicked hair. Lumberjackson.
That's really cool. Have you read Cave Carson has a cybernetic eye? Isn't that great?
It's great.
I've been talking to Oming.
Have you?
Yeah. And
he's great.
And I didn't realize he was the artist and we were doing something separate and not a comic book thing. And I'm like, I've been talking to him almost weekly the last few months. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, my God, Mike's drawing this great book. And I'm like, hey, dumbass, you got to come on Word Balloon to talk about this.
He's like, yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely. But, holidays. So I was smart. I banked a bunch of interviews. I knew you were coming in. So I had myself insulated for the holiday period. But I kind of know, this is people are traveling and stuff. Obviously, you're traveling.
I know. It brings me here.
Exactly.
That's a fun book.
But I love that book. Yeah, man. I haven't read. I bought the second issue. I haven't sat down with it yet. I bought it last Wednesday.
Shade, too. I thought the Shade
haven't
concept
read Shade yet.
Was really, it fit with, who did it? Milligan?
Pete Milligan did it back in the day. Sure.
It really felt like it sort of was a companion piece to that.
That's cool.
One.
It seems like those young animal books.
Yeah.
Gerard Way really kind of has his finger on what makes those good. And I've got the first 3 issues of Doom Patrol. Haven't sat down with them.
I still have them too. I haven't taken a look at those yet.
So.
And Cave Carson apparently came from did you see this? It came from something, it was a footnote in the Wikipedia.
Those DC Who's Who.
DC Who's Who. And nobody could tell Gerard Way what it meant.
Right. He has a cybernetic
guy. What does this mean?
Well, yeah, it's like, what does it do? I don't know.
We don't know.
I'm sorry, Arnold Drake passed away before he tells. Isn't that sad? Another guy that's coming up, hopefully. I will do this in terms of our conversation, but Drew Friedman has been on the show before, the wonderful illustrator.
Yeah.
And, he has his new Fantagraphics collection of his wonderful sketches that are almost photorealistic of great comic book creators.
Wow.
And, I was going to say sometimes the history of comics is sometimes lost to us. And Cave Carson having a cybernetic eye is one of those examples.
One of those things.
And it's so weird because there really does seem to have been a disconnect since the 90s.
Uh-huh.
And I think right now, we've got so many blogs and we've got people that do a good job of recapturing comic book history. But it seems like a disconnect in some ways.
Right.
And I'm glad to see that there are people kind of reconnecting the missing lines so that we do know the backstories of some of the things, how they were created, what the creators had in mind, whatever. And really, this Fantagraphics book is terrific, and it has a lot of great people. Is it Irish Schnepp? I forget his name. He was the letterer that is really known for all the great. He created the Superman logo.
Yes. I know who you're talking to.
Arlen Schumer did a great presentation of his work in New York.
Okay.
And I know he's represented in Friedman's book and everything. But Drew's coming up, hopefully, in a couple weeks. And it
is interesting that we've lost a little of that history to the ages now.
And hopefully there's enough people there that still want to talk. I know an independent comic book artist and writer who wants to do a thing about Mort Weisinger, the the Superman editor, before Julie Schwartz.
Right.
The guy who did it in the 50s through the very early 70s.
Right.
And after Whitney Ellsworth left DC to work on the George Reeves Superman TV show, Mort took over the book. He took over editing the book. And all that classic Silver Age stuff of like Pat Boone being in Superman books and Alan Funt and the Beatles and all that stuff. That was all during Mort's time. And he's like, who do you think are good writers and artists I can talk to that work for Mort? And I'm like, he stopped working for DC over 40 years ago, like 45 years ago. I said, so I don't know who's left. I imagine Len Wein might have stories. I don't know how much he directly worked with him.
Yeah.
I don't. Marty Pasco is another guy, and I'm like, I don't know how much he worked directly with him. Wow. But I mean, that's the thing. I'm like, your George Kardashians, and I think it was George, or however you said that guy's last name,
right?
Or God, I'm trying, and now I'm blanking. Wade would know. Mark Wade would know all these names.
Sure, of course.
But a lot of those Leo Dorfman guys like that, they're gone. Like the guys that really did work for Weisinger and stuff, they're all gone. And Arnold Drake is another guy like that too. So yeah, it's weird. God, there were so many good magazines when you and I were kids.
Oh, yeah.
Like Amazing Heroes and Comics Interview and stuff like that. And Roy Thomas certainly does an amazing job with Alter Ego. And Michael Urie does a great job with, is it Back Issue? I think Back Issue is the one that's.
Back Issues, yeah.
Yeah, 70s and 80s and stuff. So, we've got a few pockets here and there through magazine companies like Tomorrow's and stuff like that. But so many of them.
It's so interesting that these stories that really have just buoyed popular culture at this point and really are almost the cornerstone of popular culture in movies, television, video games. Like, it's so interesting when you scratch the surface and go, and it's moving so quickly now. Like, I just read a really fun interview with Ed Brubaker, who was talking about his experience on Westworld. And, he said he's answering the door for Halloween, and it's all these kids dressed as the Winter Soldier.
Oh, that's awesome.
And his wife is going, this is the guy who created the Winter Soldier. And these kids just don't even know what she's talking about. She's like, what are you talking about?
So he wrote the movie?
And I think he said, like, don't confuse the poor children. Like, don't even bother. But I just thought, like, it's so interesting now that these people we've gone out and we've conquered the world.
You're right. And the thing is, and believe me, I'm really happy that the movies and the television shows exist because they're great.
Yeah.
They are really, really great. But I don't want the people to be left behind that really did create this stuff. And I am always happy when a Jerry Conway or one of these other Bronze Age writers or artists step up and say, I did create that.
Right.
I hope I get a check. They do, thank God. It's getting better. It's getting better.
Yeah. And then you get something like, and look, I don't know any behind the scenes of like Deadpool that has a special thanks, but it doesn't say created by.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it seems like Rob has done a lot of legwork and joined the team. I don't know if Fabian.
Right. I have no idea.
I don't know what Fabian gets for it.
I have no idea.
Or even did. Well, Fabian did a lot of the heavy lifting as far as really helping create the character. But didn't Louise Simonson co-create him too?
That I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
I don't know.
See, this is where much like my Inhumans knowledge, my X-Men knowledge kind of sucks. So again, people are just yelling idiot right now. I know at their phones. And
no, you're absolutely right that you do need to. The television seems to be very good about that. Whenever they introduce somebody, I do see, like Justice League, Justice Society of America created by blah, 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 or these heroes are like, they're there. So that's smart.
No, I agree with that. No, and it's so funny, and we'll see what happens with Wonder Woman. We'll see what happens with Justice League. You can yell at all you want about the DC movies, but you can't complain about the DC television.
The television has just been fantastic.
Yeah?
It has just been fantastic. I mean, it's getting to the point where I tape every single one of the shows.
Me too.
Just to see who they're going to introduce.
Yeah,
it's the
Wild
same reason. You're like, Wild Dog.
Do you remember Wild Dog?
Yes, of course.
Max Collins and Terry
Vigilante.
Beatty. Vigilante. It's good to see Vigilante, absolutely.
I mean, they got Ragman on there.
Yes.
They got, it's crazy. Mr. Terrific is on Arrow.
Yes. And also, I do like that Jimmy Olsen is the Guardian right now in Supergirl.
Sure.
That's okay.
That's so fun.
I'm for it. It's okay.
It's so fun.
Because it fits that. Did you, I used to read Superman Family when Jimmy was Mr. Action.
Uh-huh.
And he was the investigative reporter. And it was basically like a tough Clark Kent, basically. And it was because he was old enough and in his early 20s
sure.
that he wasn't the boy photographer anymore.
Right.
But he was in the thick of things and, dealing with crooks and stuff and solving his own problems. And I
would love that. I would love him to be Elastic Lad on Supergirl.
Oh, sure. Oh, God,
You think we're going to get to that? You think we're going to get to Turtle Boy?
If I bet the only limitation would be it might be cost prohibitive from a CGI standpoint. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, I think that would be terrific.
I would write that episode
where
he turns into Turtle Boy and Supergirl has to hit him.
And Snapper, I love that Snapper Carr is on there.
Everybody.
That's great. That's
everybody.
Great.
I mean, anybody that you could ever think of. Mon-El.
I know, Mon-El. Exactly.
Mon-El is on.
I was very excited. He is my favorite Legionnaire. He always was.
Was he?
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, well, I remember reading in a reprint that Superboy's older brother's story. And it's just it was so sweet. And it's funny because Dan Wickline at Bleeding Cool, who I really like, he's a good guy and he's a good writer, but he did a few nitpicky things. And he's like, that was kind of an amnesiac mistake on Mon-El's part. And that's why he kind of came up with that name for himself because he had met Jor-El before his ship had landed on Earth. And also the whole Daxam Krypton Civil War wasn't, a real thing back in the 60s. But all that said, so he's like, why would he call himself Mon-El? And I'm like, well, I bet they explain that in the show. I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some deep, dark secret that maybe, the House of El might have been on Daxam or something. Because they're like the Romulans and the Vulcans in terms of
they are.
coming from the same people.
Right.
At least they were in the comics during that War of the Superman James Robinson story, which I love so much.
I love that.
So, yeah. No, it's cool. And again, you were asking me, I had Steve Orlando on recently, and some of the stuff we talked about. I love that he gave Kara a foreign accent in the comic. And so she speaks kind of awkwardly. And it does kind of bring that, it brings that alien immigrant thing without hitting your head, hitting yourself over the head. And also it solves the problem of, the blonde, blue-eyed girl who looks very white and very Americanized,
right?
And it's like, no, she's still different,
she's still an alien.
Even as Kara, she in her Linda Danvers, guys, she's still different.
Steve's he's another one of those smart guys.
Oh yeah,
real smart in his storytelling, and one of these guys who have been fans for just so long.
Seems like it,
just so long.
Yeah, he gets it.
He does.
Well, that's been the great thing, and you and I have talked before about my own dissatisfaction with the way things went with the New 52 in the main books, and it really does seem like Rebirth has righted the ship.
I think so, man. I mean, I think that, look, I have no part of it. I'm just an outsider reading, and I'm having a great time.
Yeah, man.
I love the joy, and I love the excitement that people have really tapped back into. And, I think just reading what Jeff has said about it, it really was about legacy. about legacy and history and
Sure.
lineage that we were just missing. And to put these characters in the middle of nowhere with no connection to anything hurt our hearts.
Yes.
You know,
Well,
I think it just hurts our hearts.
because we were friends with these heroes and they were all friends as well.
That's right.
And that all disappeared.
Yeah.
And they were meeting each other for the first time and doing it in a kind of, back to what we were saying at the beginning, this Marvel sort of way of, who are you?
Right.
I got to fight you. And it's like, no, it's Barry and Hal Jordan, for Christ's sake.
We love them.
You know, if I could be Jimmy Stewart. These guys, you used to be friends, for gosh sakes.
That's right.
What are you doing?
That's right. So I think that is something that we were missing. And I think it's worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's worked.
Well, and wiping out the Titans.
Yeah.
And that's that core of not only the generation. I mean, I felt it a bit. I was in college when Wolfman and Perez were doing their thing.
Uh-huh.
And I enjoyed the book. I was always more of a Legion guy than I was a Teen Titans or X-Men guy. But no, I get it. And certainly the people.
Now, why?
I loved all the aliens, and I love the idea that they represented so many different planets, had so many different superpowers, the whole thing.
Yeah,
I was loved from Chameleon Boy to even the stupid ones like Stone Boy and Matter Eater Lad.
Loved it.
Sign me up.
Loved it.
Got no problem with that.
That was another one I've been dying to do. Is the Legion of Substitute Heroes.
Fantastic. Polar Boy.
I've been dying to do a Legion of Substitute Heroes. Chlorophyll Kid.
Yes.
I love them.
Infectious Lass.
Night Lass. Those Giffen series were so important.
The 5 years later stuff where it got really dark.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no, I really. Oh
and
my god,
the Levitz Legion is just.
You know, honestly, and even that was another bright spot post Flashpoint was. Wow, it is so good to have Paul writing Legion again, and he was doing it before Flashpoint as well. And that's the thing; it was like as I keep saying, that's the thing. It's like. Oh, there they are.
Right.
There's those heroes that have the backstory and what you love. And, you know, you could be shitty about it and say it's dad's comics, but I think Marvel Zombies would agree it's the same thing, that the lineage and the understanding that, no, you know, there's always been a good thing about whatever Marvel relationship you want to put together or a funny thing where the two guys irritate each other. I mean, you know, Steve Rogers and Hawkeye.
Right.
I mean, you know, it's like, no, if you take that relationship away and start them both at square one again, you know, it worked in the Ultimates, but the Ultimates was a different thing, and you were still getting the 616
That's right.
while that was happening.
That's right.
It wasn't completely torn away.
That's right. It's hard because anything, you know, this is something that when we would talk to Len Wein, he said the most genius thing I've ever heard about comics, which is continuity ties your best storyteller to your worst storyteller.
Yes.
So the weight of 50 years of continuity on any relationship is tough because you got to pick and you got to cherry pick what aspects of it you want to bring out.
Sure.
And also as a storyteller, what new are you going to add to a relationship that could have feasibly been around for 75 years?
Absolutely.
So I do get why wiping the slate clean feels like you're taking the chains off.
Right. It's free. Absolutely.
It's
it frees
totally
things up.
freeing. It frees things up. Because otherwise you're like, geez.
I can't do that back in 67.
Exactly.
You know, Sinestro did that to Al Jordan.
Exactly.
And everybody knows it.
So, but in the same time, when you follow that, to remove all of that and to crap on the continuity makes the people who came along for that whole ride.
Yeah, they're left out. Well, they walked away. That's why sales dropped. Everybody walked away.
That's exactly right.
So no, I get it. I want you to make your commitment. So it's. I think you got at least 10 minutes.
No, we're good.
To, jump into a cab or something. Oh, is there a clock? You can see a clock?
No.
I was going to say.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. Well, because I want to know about some other TV stuff you got brewing.
It's funny that you ask. I'm very lucky. I'm writing a pilot for Freeform right now.
Fantastic. The former ABC family. That has always been very sci-fi and geek friendly.
Yes. So they're looking at some genre stuff, and I'm writing a pilot for them. And my producers are I'm very lucky to be working with Tara Butters and Michelle Fazekas, who the listeners might know were running Agent Carter for a while.
Excellent.
And they were running Resurrection, and they're the ladies who created Reaper. They're
Reaper was great. Reaper was really funny.
So smart.
I got to meet Ray Wise, and I'm
Did
like,
you?
yeah, and I'm like, dude, you're an excellent devil.
These ladies are so smart. I'm so lucky to be working with them. And so we've been working on this project for a little over a year. We sold it to Freeform, and I'm writing the outline right now, and I'll get to write the script. And it's set in Chicago, so hopefully I'll get to come and shoot a pilot.
Boy, that'd be good. Yeah,
that'd
man.
be fun.
And this is a totally original concept?
Totally original
it's not a Marvel
concept,
thing?
not based on anything, and except my own stuff. So
that's
hopefully
huge, man.
That'll be my next big thing that I'm working on.
That's excellent. No, they are tremendous creators.
Oh, they're amazing.
And I'm really
it's a dream come true to get to work with them.
I bet, man. No, and that's a great household. Tara Butters and Mark Guggenheim.
I asked Tara about Mark. I was like, how does he get all that stuff done? She's like, I don't know.
How the two of them get all that done?
No kidding.
Honestly, because that's what I asked Mark. I got to talk to Mark about it, and I'm like, seriously, man, aren't you looking over each other's shoulders? He's like, yeah, of course, all the time.
Of course. One showrunner for Marvel, one showrunner for DC. I mean, it was
fantastic.
It was amazing. They were writing comics for, they wrote a Captain Marvel run that we talked a lot about.
The women did? Tara
and Michelle.
Wow, I didn't realize
Michelle
that.
wrote a Captain Marvel run. I think it was 6-8 issues or something.
That's fantastic.
It was really fun.
I'm hoping. I was sad that Haley Atwell lost her new series. The fact that she's free again, I hope they can shoehorn some sort of flashback story where, because Jeff Mace now being in S.H.I.E.L.D. And him being the Patriot. And also, I loved how they retconned him to be one of the faux Captain Americas of the post-war period.
Right.
I think it would be great to see him trying to be Captain America with Haley being Agent Carter.
That would be really interesting.
And believe me, I got to call into Loeb, and I'm hoping that we talk soon. We've been texting each other.
That would be awesome.
But yeah, that's my pitch.
That.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
By the way, Jason O'Mara, my Batman in many of my movies. The Batman voice.
Yes, it did. I know. I got to meet him in New York. He was doing the press junket for Justice League Dark. And could not have been a sweeter guy.
Sweet guy, right?
And he's a great Batman.
He's really stepped up to that role. I know when he did Justice League War, it was something that was really intimidating to him because he said as a kid growing up in Ireland, I believe.
Yes, yeah,
he was Ireland. All I did was read Batman comics in college. He was like, I love Batman.
That's awesome.
It was so unbelievable because you don't. There aren't a whole ton of actors who come in and are unabashedly comic book fans.
Oh yeah. Well, and it was funny because I'm like, what other superhero, characters would you like to be on film? He's like, well, fucking Batman. Man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess. And I go, well, you're already Batman. He goes, yeah. And he goes, and it's great in animation, but I want to be Batman on film. And I'm like, okay, he'd be great. He was the best thing about the American Life on Mars.
Oh, totally.
And he really was great.
Yes,
because it wasn't
great.
It was it's not as good as the British one. If you've never seen the British one, it's kind of like Elementary. If you've never seen Sherlock,
that's right.
I think Elementary is it's begrudgingly a good show, but it's not Sherlock.
That's right.
And it does kind of bug me the changes that they made. And Life on Mars, the American Life on Mars, I'd say the same thing. But that said, he was fantastic as Sam Tyler and the main guy.
He's great.
And yeah, he's terrific. And also great seeing Constantine in Justice League.
Yes.
So
how about that?
He's great. He was funny.
And
the two of them
Matt
were hilarious.
Ryan.
Yes.
Matt Ryan?
Yes.
Isn't that who it is?
I think that's his name.
Yeah,
and that's why I couldn't remember his name. But he was another one that, so excited to do the cartoon. It's great that his schedule allows him to do it and still, and also showing up on Arrow as he did.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. No,
it's
that's
great.
really cool.
It's wonderful when people really bite into a role and just love it as much as we love seeing them do it.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Definitely. Let me ask you, and I know you can't go into detail on Justice League Action.
Yes.
From a tone standpoint.
Yes.
How is it different from the movies? Can you quantify?
Absolutely. I think you're going to see in Justice League Action, even in the title, it's a lot more fun. It is much more inclusive. It's brighter. Okay. We're not going as dark, even as dark and sophisticated as it was on Justice League Unlimited.
Okay.
You're still going to get a lot of it's fun, it's comedy, it's bouncy. There's big action. We still take it very seriously. The stuff's happening. We're real serious with the characters, but not all the characters take themselves as seriously as you think. So you're going to get a lot of different tones. And so whoever's showing up is really going to drive it. You know?
Okay.
I think really when you see who's there, you're going to go, oh, I kind of know what we're
what
in
to expect.
for. You know?
Okay.
But it's a lot of fun.
No,
it's
looking forward to it.
It's a lot of fun. And they're fast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so that's coming up, and that's mid-December, December 16th.
That's mid-December. A lot of stuff for December. That, and then check out the
holiday issue of DC Rebirth.
Yeah.
Very cool, with Detective Chimp.
Yeah, and people can always find me on Twitter at Heath Corson.
Excellent.
And listen to the Nerdist Comics panel.
You're kicking ass on that show.
Dude, you're so sweet.
I'm really glad that it is on a weekly schedule, and you guys have come up with great guests. My best to Blacker. I haven't had him on forever, but I do miss him.
I keep trying to get him to come to Chicago with me for Thanksgiving. He's afraid of the cold. He's afraid of the cold.
And yeah, I mean, it's nothing right now. I mean, really, this is
this is easy.
It really is. I mean, it's, upper 30s, low 40s and stuff. So, no, I can imagine. Oh, the West Coast guys, they don't know. They don't know.
No, my blood's thinned.
It's true. And I know that too. I know when you even spend just one season out there.
Oh, you're done.
Exactly, man. The crust comes off of us and we're all tender feet again. No, I understand.
No kidding.
But you're kicking ass. I'm really happy for that.
Oh, you're
again,
the best.
Nerdist Comics, is it?
It's just
Nerdist Writers Comics panel.
No, just the Nerdist Comics panel.
Nerdist Comics panel. All right, fine. And it's on, of course, the Nerdist Network.
Yes, check us out.
And absolutely, because really, great example of good conversation, and one of the reasons why our guest today, Heath Corson. So thank you as always, and great to see you.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Have good holidays.
You too, and I'll see you at one of these cons. Maybe C2E2.
I was going to say, are you coming back in the spring?
Maybe, where they're still trying to figure out. I did a bunch of moderation at the last one, and I'm hoping I get a chance to come back and do it again.
There you go, Heath Corson. Great talking to him, and great sharing it with you on today's episode of Word Balloon. It was all brought to you by GeekFuel.com. Geek Fuel is a great subscription box service that ships out a mystery box each month. It has at least $50 worth of value for just $15 plus shipping and handling. We're talking about an exclusive t-shirt, a full downloadable game, and 5 to 7 other great geek culture items every month. This is a great Christmas gift, or buy it for yourself and you'll have several holiday and birthday gifts to share with friends and family for months to come. You can start your subscription today and get a free bonus item worth $10 in your first box if you head to geekfuel.com/wordballoon. That's geekfuel.com/wordballoon. Thanks again for listening today. More great episodes coming up this month of December. I've suddenly got a lot of free time on my hands and a lot of opportunities to talk to some of your favorite creators, artists, writers, newcomers, all talking about the geek culture, some things that they're working on, and their thoughts as we head into 2017. Please join me for the next episode of Word Balloon. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2016.